I first saw the fence at dawn, a jagged silhouette slicing through dew-drenched grass like a barbed proclamation of ownership. My horses raised their heads in alarm as the rising sun glinted off new nails and fresh boards. I yanked on boots and sprinted across my property line. Heart pounding with disbelief, Karen had erected this barrier without warning, without permit, and most of all without any right. Only yesterday the pasture stretched uninterrupted, a living canvas where cattle grazed and wildflowers swayed. Now that canvas was vandalized by entitlement embodied in 8-foot posts and rigid planks. I approached the fence's midpoint and saw Hera's squat figure perched on a ladder, her designer sandals scuffed, pink cheeks puffed with defiance. She caught sight of me and shouted, "You think you can just do whatever you want with this community trust land? I'm enforcing the covenants." Before I could retort, she hammered down the final board and waved her clipboard like a badge. The air crackled with tension, my blood surged with outrage. This was my land, my heritage, and I would not let a self-appointed queen rewrite its borders. I left her to her theatrics and retreated to my home office, where titles and tax records lay scattered across my desk. I logged onto the county desk portal and overlaid property lines. Hers ended dozens of feet before the fence began. I opened a PDF of the recorded deed for my ranch, rubber-stamped in the clerk's office 6 months ago, and a separate PDF showing the HOA's limited easement rights never included fence installation. Within minutes, I had the legal ammunition I needed. Maps, deeds, and a scanned copy of the HOA bylaws that explicitly forbade unilateral boundary structures. I drafted a cease and desist email to the HOA president Karen herself, and copied the county code enforcement officer, attaching my proof. Then I drove back to the fence with a small crowd of neighbors summoned by my text. Bring your cameras, bring your questions. By lunchtime, a semicircle of witnesses had formed. Ranchers in dusty hats, birdwatchers with zoom lenses, even the local mail carrier leaning against her truck. Karen stood at the fence's edge, panting from ladder duty, her clipboard now losing its sheen of authority. I stepped forward, printed maps in hand. "This fence violates multiple statutes," I said, voice steady but electrified. "Remove it within 48 hours or face a mandatory hearing with the county." Karen's face hardened. "You'll see me. Petition passes next week. This fence stands." I smirked. "Your petition is null until you follow procedure. You didn't file for a permit, you didn't notify neighbors, you didn't survey the land. I have every document here." One neighbor murmured, "Call the county." True enough, within minutes a code enforcement truck rumbled up, officer knocking on the fence like a judge's gavel. The real confrontation came when Karen stormed into my home office that afternoon, clutching a stack of hand-drawn surveys she claimed validated her fence. She slapped them onto my desk, ink smudged from sweat and indignation. "You can't steal my voice," she shouted. "I represent the neighborhood's safety fences." I leaned back, folding my arms over my chest. "You represent nothing when you bypass the rule of law. We're not animals to be penned at your whim." Her nostrils flared. She yanked out her phone to record, ready to cast herself as victim. I nodded. "Record away. I've got the clerk on standby ready to join this call." Her defiance wavered as the county planner's calm voice greeted her through the speakerphone, summarizing her violations and impending fine. The moment her bravado cracked, her shoulders slumped. She stepped forward, tears welling. This was the unexpected twist. The entitlement queen undone by her own tears. We watched together as the planner explained that if the fence wasn't removed within 24 hours, the county would send a crew to bulldoze it, billing her for the labor. Karen wiped her cheeks, gaze dropping to the floorboards of her mock palisade. Her voice quivered when she said, "Two thought I was protecting the neighborhood." I nodded to the code officer through the open door, signaled approval to proceed. Karen sank onto a lawn chair I'd placed for her convenience, and for the first time I saw vulnerability beneath the hostility. A woman terrified of irrelevance, wielding boards instead of words. At sunrise the next day, heavy machinery rolled onto my land. A backhoe driver, following clear orders from the planner's office, pried loose fence posts as neighbors watched in silent solidarity. Karen arrived late, clutching her tote bag, and approached the clearing site. Her eyes flicked from splintered boards to the neat pile of nails and screws, her tears falling with each whine of the steel bucket. She set down her bag and turned to me. "I don't know how this happened," she whispered. "I thought I had support." I stepped out of the onlookers, keeping my tone soft. Support comes with responsibility. If you want to help, you'll come to the scheduled HOA meeting next week and present your concerns properly, with petitions, signatures, and approvals. She nodded, wiping tears on her sleeve. The backhoe operator paused, engine idling, and offered her a bottle of water. I watched her take it. Her posture slumped but not defeated. There was a spark of resolve flickering despite her sobs. As the machine resumed, the fence disintegrated before our eyes. What was once a symbol of division became mulch beneath the tracks, nourishing the earth it once confined. By noon the land lay bare again, the horses grazing where boards once stood. Karen approached me and said, "Thank you for handling this with fairness." I met her gaze. Fairness isn't weakness. It's consistency. Show up next week to fix this properly. She straightened her shoulders, nodding. I will. As the county crew loaded the last fence remains onto a trailer, I turned to the community watching from the windbreak of trees. Their nods affirmed that justice had been served not through vengeance, but through rule of law. Now I leave you remembering those boards and that morning spark. When entitlement meets accountability, which side will you choose? Remember, right or wrong. The afternoon light shifted into golden hour as I wandered the pasture fencing posts awaiting their fate, and I felt a strange sense of guardianship not over walls of wood, but over the spirit of this land. I returned to the barn to retrieve my truck, passing neighbors who waved and offered quiet smiles. The unity forged by conflict had softened into routine warmth. The postman tipped his hat, the beekeeper adjusted her hive boxes with a nod, and even the local veterinarian paused to greet me with a handshake. In the days that followed, the county's bulldozer blades circled the old fence footprint, leveling the ground and tilting the earth back to its natural contours. I met with the county planner again to discuss restoration. Seed mixes for native grasses, erosion control along the ridgelines, and guidelines for any future boundary structures needing formal approval. He handed me a permit application for a heritage fence, one that would honor the original ranch lines, built in collaboration with community input. I felt respect for the process I had once dismissed, understanding now that stewardship was not solitary but shared. The twist came when Karen returned one morning bearing seedlings of sagebrush and milkweed plants indigenous to our region. She approached me at the maintenance shed, gloves stained with earth and eyes determined. "I spoke with the Conservation Society," she said, "and they offered these starters for pollinator patches along the fence line." Surprised, I accepted the small pots. We planted them together along the boundary road, her hands trembling as she set roots into the soil, as though burying her past missteps beneath living proof of renewal. Word spread of her project and neighbors volunteered. High school students lugged watering cans, retirees donated biodegradable mulch, and the local Girl Scout troop crafted laminated signs reading "Pollinator's Paradise." Each morning I found Karen tending the patch, her posture a humble arch bent over new growth. She'd even begun publishing monthly updates in the HOA newsletter, articles on local ecology, on the importance of shared stewardship, and on the lessons she'd learned about overreach. As summer ripened, the pollinator corridor burst into bloom. Purple milkweed, yellow fleabane, and silver sage fluttered in the breeze as bees and butterflies danced. During our community picnic on the restored grass, I raised a toast to new beginnings, and Karen stood beside me, lifting her soda can shyly. "To shared responsibility," she said, meeting my gaze. The crowd cheered, not for a single individual's triumph, but for collective transformation. Autumn arrived with crisp winds that carried the scent of earth and pine. The heritage fence, constructed of reclaimed oak and wrapped in barbless wire, now marked the official boundary, its design approved by every neighbor and every council member. On its plaques we etched quotes not of separation but of unity, lines from Frost and Whitman, reminding us that boundaries can exist without borders in our hearts. The final twist unfolded when the county planner invited us to speak at a regional land management conference. He wanted to showcase our pastures restoration and community-led boundary model. Karen and I prepared a joint presentation, her on ecological engagement, me on legal process. On stage, in front of hundreds of landowners and policymakers, she recounted her initial misstep with candor and her path to collaboration. I spoke of the power of due process and the necessity of compassion. When our talk ended, the audience rose in applause, not for me, not for her, but for the living example of a community that had turned conflict into catalyst. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the rolling hills, I found Karen alone by the sapling weave fence, her silhouette framed in twilight. She turned and smiled a quiet, genuine curve of lips. "Thank you," she said, voice barely above the gusting wind. I placed a hand on her shoulder. "Thank you for showing that even the boldest boards can be repurposed for growth." Standing there, I realized that what began as a battle over property lines had evolved into a testament of shared destiny. The earth beneath my boots had borne witness to boards raised in anger, and later to roots of connection. Now more than ever, I understood that entitlement is a brittle thing forgotten as soon as the soil reclaims its own, and that true authority arises when guardianship is exercised with empathy. So when you look at that weathered plank, scrawled with "This land isn't yours," remember its new message. This land belongs to all. And I'll ask you once more. When division meets community, which will you choose? Right or wrong?